Today in this video, we are going to be looking at Priory of the Sacred Flame, and this is going to be my version of a pug-friendly route. This is the route that I run whenever I pug this dungeon, whether I'm farming for Tome of Light's Devotion, or I am just trying to get weekly keys done on my alts. This is a loose structure of what a high-end route can look like as well. There are some adaptations that groups have made. There's also the argument for right versus left. Now, in this route, this is going to be a left side route. With that being said, there are considerations for going right versus left. If you go right, you're going to need a lot more kicks for Dual Maul, who is going to be the mini boss on the first boss of the encounter. If you don't have coordinated kicks, or you're not something like a prop paladin who can constantly throw Avenger Shield at this target, I don't recommend going right side. I think it's a trap. There is merit to going to that side, but again, it depends on what tank you're playing, it depends on your composition, and it depends on your coordination. There are players who don't kick, there's players who don't use defensives. It's just, it happens. If you don't have agency, don't go right side. With that out of the way, let's talk about what I like to do in this dungeon. So starting off, we are going to grab the 4 footmen and we are going to run them into this right side patrol. Now, the way that this works is when you're running up to this pack, this patrol on the right side is going to be walking towards you, and this pack is going to be walking away from you. So you have plenty of time to focus down one of these knights. These knights are what are dangerous in this pull. They are riding one of the war lynxes. They do 2 things. They will blast a player with Impale, which applies a pretty nasty bleed effect, and they'll also cast Disrupting Shout, which does a burst of physical damage, and it'll silence spell casting. Ideally, you don't ever want 2 of these in the same pull. So with it being the first pull of the dungeon, this is a good spot to lust. Now, there are routes where you run with all of this and you end up pulling all of this onto the mini boss. I am not going to recommend that here for pugs because I just don't think it's efficient, especially if you're not using defensives and kicking the right things and focusing down the knight. So once this pack is pretty much dead, most of the footmen will probably be pretty low. You want to focus this knight, and what's going to end up happening is that this knight patrol is going to come back towards your group, and it's going to end up getting pulled into this pack essentially late. So that is going to be your first pull. This is a good spot to lust. You have CDs available. The knights are scary, and for a little bit of time, you're going to be pulling mobs that aren't necessarily lethal to your group. So next, we are going to pull Suleiman. By the time you defeat this first pull, Suleiman, the mini boss, should be around this knight pack. Depending on how fast you are, he may be walking towards it still. He may be walking away from it. But basically, you're going to pull these Suleiman, or Suleiman, the guard captain, with these couple of footmen. The main reason for this is because footmen don't really bear any pressure on your group outside of the fact that they just melee your tank fairly hard, and they cast defend once they're below 50% health. Once they do that, just hit them with a CC. It's very chill. Now, there is an option to pull additional targets on top of Suleiman. What I like to do is once the footmen die, Suleiman should be roughly at half health. He has about double the health pool of all of these other forces. If not, he has a little bit more, close to actually to 3 times the amount. So what you're going to do is you're going to walk around with Suleiman. I then like to pull Suleiman over to this pack of casters. It's a priest, it's a conjurer, and it's a footman. Now, I personally recommend that you have at least 1 kick up for the priest, because if you pull the priest, chances are he's going to start actually by casting his greater heal on the mini boss, and if that happens, it's just going to take even longer to kill him. So basically, you're going to treat this entire area like one big chain pull. So Suleiman should go down at the same time these casters do as well. And now you're going to be waiting for Chainmail. Chainmail is the mini boss that gets summoned when Suleiman dies. She's going to run directly to his corpse and search for what's going on. Now, while you're waiting for Chainmail to come down, you can finish off any remaining trash, but I also recommend pulling in 1 sharpshooter with a footman pack. So this is what you're going to pair up with Chainmail. Chainmail does basically 2 big things. She does Lunging Strike at a random player, which will apply a nasty bleed, and she does Brutal Smash. Basically, spread out whenever she's casting this. If you have range, great. If you don't, melee, ideally want to spread out just a little bit. Once all of this goes down, you are able to walk through here without pulling any packs. You can do it by just waiting for the patrol to be in a good spot and just take your time. There's no rush. This timer is very lenient based on, obviously, your group's item level and composition. Next, what I like to do is you're going to walk around the edge here and go onto the mini boss. This is, there's a few options in this area. This is something that I like to do. But if you are concerned with the pugs that you're in, you can just clear straight forward. I would recommend pulling the patrol, maybe with this pack here. Then you'll pull maybe these packs together, and then you'll finish up with the mini boss. Now, for me personally, I've had pretty good experiences in pugs, and we end up grabbing the 2 footmen here, the 2 footmen here, and then we pull it onto Amia. Now, the reason I like to get onto Amia quick is because she's not only very beefy in terms of health pool, but she also has a massive absorb that needs to get chewed through. So by getting trash onto her early, you're going to have an easier time getting her down while also clearing other trash. Then what I like to do is when these footmen die, Amia should be around 30% health or so, you can then chain Amia onto this pack here. So it'll look something like this. Now for the context of this, I'm going to just keep it like this. It's fine. These packs, these casters can be pulled kind of up the stairs or towards the stairs, and you should have enough room to work with. Now again, it's a little dangerous because there's a lot of casters here, but as long as you make sure you're getting kicks on a couple of them, Amia should die before the light spawn hits 30% health. Once Amia dies, Dual Maul is going to be summoned to her location, basically. He's going to start running this way, so you have a little bit of time. Once Amia goes down, this pack should also be near dead. You're then going to have Dual Maul, and you can pull Dual Maul with this pack here. So you, again, have a couple of kiss. You have a couple of kicks here. You have priests, conjurers, and of course, Dual Maul. Now, Dual Maul doesn't really do much. He casts Ember Storm, which can be a little chaotic. And he casts Fireball, but his Cinder Blast was removed, so you no longer have to worry about that Dispel or that kick stunning the tank. So essentially, just make sure you're getting kicks, and you should be fine. Now, this is going to look a little chaotic, obviously, because of how Dual Maul is technically far away. Next, what I like to do then is I'm going to pull this 3-pack here with the patrol. Now, you can do this as a slow chain. Like, let's say your patrol is a little bit further. Wait for the patrol to walk back, and while you're doing that, you can just, like, focus down the priest, for example. And then, this is going to put you at 47, almost 48% count. You should be really good at this number. So next, you're going to go on to boss. Now, this, I want to get, like, the thing I want to stress is that when you do this strategy with Emberlands, you're going to have to handle, or your healer's going to have to handle the Holy Radiance cast. But what I like about this is that it's not RNG. Like, if you go Damien, for example, going the right side, you have to deal with, like, fireballs targeting random players. This is tank damage with Divine Judgment and group damage with Holy Radiance. So healers can prepare for it, and it's consistent, it's static, and tanks can prepare for the Divine Judgment. The one thing I will say is that healers are going to want to dispel the Divine Judgment off the tank because it makes them take increased damage by 25% for 8 seconds. So dispel your tank. It's not hard. If you can dispel your tank, healers and tanks scale really well defensively and with their healing throughput later into the expansion. So with it being Season 3, most groups should have no issue doing this. In my opinion, of course, there are some people who say tank struggle or healer struggle, whatever, but I think this is more consistent than going and having to deal with a caster on boss. Of course, if you're a tank, watch out for the Pierce armor, use a defensive or some type of mitigation, and make sure you're watching the kick for the battle cry. But this makes this extremely rhythmic compared to chaotic, which is what I find when you pull Damien instead. All right, with all that out of the way, there's a lot of information at the start of the dungeon that I wanted to go over. The rest of this dungeon should be pretty straightforward because it's a lot of the mobs that we've seen before. Generally, at this point, it should be about 11, 12, 13 minutes into the dungeon. You could have lusted the first boss, but we are going to lust this next pull. So what I like to do is I like to grab all of these Paladins and Templars. I grab the Neophytes, and then I go right side to grab 2 more Paladins, a Templar, and a Priest. The only thing you have to kick in here is the Priest, ideally on their casts. And then, of course, it's going to be a lot of group damage, very bursty. Now, again, if you're not comfortable doing this pull, if maybe you're playing with a healer who's not super adequate, you can drop it and do this in a little bit more of a segmented way. If you have Lust, if you have CDs and you think your healer can handle it, do a big pull. Paladins do this thing called Sacred Toll. It's a big burst of holy damage to all players. They get desynced, and that's on purpose. Blizzard has added a in-game mechanic that desyncs these mobs from casting all of these at the same time. There's generally going to be 2 to 3 seconds in between, so basically your healer's goal is to top players in between each cast, and then DPS and tanks alike should be using defenses whenever Sacred Toll is about to go off. So as long as your healer can counter 4 Divine Tolls back to back to back, you should be good. Now, another option is that you could go and do this pull instead, which has 1 less Paladin, but there's more tank damage with the Templars. The Templars do this thing called Seal of Light's Flurry, which their melee attacks do magic damage. This can be purged off. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. It'll definitely help out your tank. And then they also basically get wings, where they get a 30% damage increase for a handful of seconds. So big pull, but Lust, Healer CDs, DPS CDs should get this pack down really quickly. After that, you can take it really slow. You can do 1 pack at a time if you like. You can double it up. What I like to do personally is I like to do this pull right here, pull number 10. You focus down the priest. Once this priest dies, you then chain it into this pull here. And you end up getting like a pseudo double pull. And then same thing here. Once these casters die and it's just the paladins left, you can then walk over and grab this pack. The reason you're not pulling all these together is because if you don't have coordination, there's just, quite frankly, too many casters. But at this point, you should be fast enough where you're still going to be looking at a good timer. You want to be pulling this boss no later than like the 18-minute mark. So if you can clear this entire area in about 4 minutes, you should be absolutely fine in terms of the timer, because we had 47% count coming in here. So you'll then do second boss. And then lastly, the rest of the dungeon is pretty much just hold W. So you're going to do this pack by itself. You're going to slowly walk it up the stairs unless you have like a Destrolock or a Frost Mage or someone that requires mobs to stay still. You can slowly walk them up the stairs out of the consecrations. Then what I like to do is I like to pull this pack here. It is a Footman and 2 Paladins into the right side pack. It's a Mage, a Lightspawn, and a Templar. If you focus the Lightspawn, you should have an easier time. But also focusing like a Paladin down is also not a bad idea. Next, what I like to do is it's like a little bit of a cooldown recovery pull. You pull this right side pack, so it's a Lightspawn, a Mage, and a Footman. And you can tag in this little patrolling Footman. Just be careful on this center patrol, because if he's obviously close or the patrol's there, you don't want to double it up. Next, we wait for the patrol to be in a good spot, and then we pull that, making sure we're kicking mages and focusing down the Lightspawn. And then finally, we're going to pull Braunpike with his 2 priests. And if you have a way to CC out this priest here, you can. So you would CC him out and you would do this pull here. And then you would grab this guy near once these casters die, and then you can drag them on to this other pack. Now, this is going to put you a little bit above the 100%. You're almost at 101%, but there's not really anything like super efficient you can drop at the start that would make sense. Like maybe you can drop like Footman, but honestly, this is also a fine route. And if you really need to, you can drag this final pack onto the last boss if you're close on time. So overall, this is the route that I recommend for pugs. This is what I run. It's pretty hard to mess up. It also, outside of maybe this skip right here, there isn't a lot of area where you can accidentally body pull a bunch of mobs and become a shit show. You're minimizing the amount of casters you have from pull to pull. And when you do chain, make sure casters are dying as you move from pack to pack. So before you go from, pack 2 to pack 3, make sure the pack 2 casters are dead. Anyways, I hope that made sense. I hope that helped. Let me know your preferred route. Let me know if you try this and you end up liking it or not. I'm always open to suggestions. Now, if you're interested in seeing a right side route, let's say you're a Protection Paladin main, or maybe you play with a Protection Paladin and you want a route for that side, I have a route that goes right that's just as efficient, if not a little better. But again, it requires coordination. So that's the biggest thing that I don't like with pug routes, is if it requires coordination, it's not a good route. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.